So, students, professors, parents, distinguished guests, undistinguished guests if there are any, good afternoon and welcome to the Augustine College family. It is an honor to be able to have you here today and to share a fraction of what we've gained by being a part of this program over the last year. I know that many of you come from all over the continent, or even further, so it's difficult to know whether I should start off with a joke about the Ottawa Senators or the Montreal Canadiens. But out of respect for our American friends that have Canadian hockey players winning their Stanley Cups each year, it's probably safe to sidestep the whole issue altogether. Now, before I begin, I apologize if my jokes aren't as funny. The valedictorian, I thought, what does a valedictorian do? And so I looked up the Latin, and as we've started to study, I've looked up the word vale and dicere, which talks about saying farewell at the end. I'm not at the end, and my jokes will not be as funny. But that's okay. I'll make them up as I go. So, graduation day. How have we made it this far? What inspired us to keep going when we thought that one more hour of writing papers would bring us to the end of ourselves? It is important for us as students of Augustine College to recognize and appreciate all those that contributed to our arrival here today. And I could start by recognizing some of those efforts. But since I don't know how else to keep paying attention until I finish, I'm going to leave that till the end. I promise it will be worth the wait, though. First, I would like to take a look at the progress we have made throughout our time at Augustine College. Augustine's progressions, if you will. Normally, I would apologize for such a pun, but in this instance I have to thank Augustine College for its exceptional ability to develop a healthy sense of humor, including sarcasm, quick wit, and especially puns. Laughter has been a big part of our ability to make it to the end of this semester. 8 months ago, most of us were worried about all of the required reading we had to do over the summer, before our classes had even started. Some were wondering about the challenges of being out of the house for the first time, and how we would manage day-to-day living with a roommate. That's a fair concern. Not everyone can be privileged enough to have Isaac Lee as a roommate. I'm sure if we all are honest with ourselves, a lot has changed since that time of uncertainty, travel, and first impressions. And looking back has been an important part of our program at Augustine College. In understanding where we are headed, it is critical to understand where we came from and how we got to where we are today. George Orwell wrote that the most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history. This week, the professors asked our class about the most significant things we're taking with us from this program, and I'd like to take this opportunity to revisit that question. For me, Augustine College has been a big part in opening the door to look at the history of the Western world, and most importantly, its interaction with Christendom throughout the last 2,000 years. In the pursuit of wisdom and truth, we are obligated to know more than just where we are today. We must know how we arrived. If we forget those who have gone before us, we will fail to learn from the challenges they have faced. Mark Twain sums this up quite well when he says, "History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme." I first heard about Augustine College through Dr. Patrick at a conference in 2013. And one particular point planted a seed in my mind that brought me here, ended up in me being here today. In the beginning of Exodus, when the Israelites are enslaved, or before the Israelites are enslaved in Egypt, we think about what happened when there arose a king who knew not Joseph. There are many places in the scriptures that call God's people back to this point. But when they become ignorant of the slavery, the plagues, and the dramatic deliverance God brought about through those circumstances, they're doomed to repeat it. Now, there may never be another Israelite exodus, but what God wants us to learn from Israel's past is eternal. What we face in our lives will always have lingering elements of our slavery and God's deliverance. Another important part of the program at Augustine is Augustine's most famous work, the Confessions. And for those of you who haven't taken the opportunity to read this Christian classic, he writes out his confessions with a dual purpose: to confess his own foolishness, declaring his sins before God, and to confess the great things that God has shown him, declaring God's name to man. Like Augustine, we must also examine our own history, being fully aware of the sins and struggles that we outgrow, and looking back to see God's masterpiece being weaved throughout every moment. There's no such thing as knowledge for the sake of knowledge. Those who seek frivolous knowledge still have a goal in mind, perhaps pride in knowing more than someone else, or a job that requires you to know about a particular subject matter. No matter how noble or basic, there's a determined purpose for that knowledge. After explaining some of my early classwork to another university student, they wondered why anyone would need to study things like logical fallacies or how words and ideas are connected to each other. Now, in Socratic style, there were much more fundamental questions that needed to be asked. Why do we feel the need to study anything? What is the purpose of obtaining knowledge? Why learn? Now, I had reservations about using certain parts of this speech because I know, or I had understood that Dr. Tingley would be speaking first, and part of this talk came from the fruit of his lectures. But I decided it would be useful to take parts that might not necessarily be repeated information. Now, I want you all to pay close attention to this question so you don't miss the philosophical depth of it. What is the purpose of a tree? Treeness. Treeness. But what is this treeness? Some of you are looking at me with the same face that I had in that lecture, and that was probably the third or fourth time this idea had already come up. But I'm sure you're all much better students than me, so you'll get this on the first try. The purpose of a tree is to flourish. And by flourish, I don't mean important philosophical hand gestures that drive the point home. And for those of you who aren't in the pleasure of our class, I want you all to know that Dr. Tingley is one of my favorite professors, and they say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So he will probably ask me to defend that statement with a logical syllogism, but perhaps that's a privilege that I'm not having to come back afterwards. Anyway, flourishing is a thing becoming what it is made to be. It's the fullness of its created purpose. Treeness is to do its best at being a tree. It needs to spread out its leaves and absorb sunlight. It needs to transform that light into energy, to feed and to grow, its branches stretching higher, its roots burrowing deeper. So what is the ultimate purpose of knowledge and studying? These are human characteristics, so we need to know what humanness is. As human beings created in the image of God, we have a rational mind. And as his church, we have the mind of Christ. Words, study, knowledge. They are all for that purpose of becoming what God has created us to be, using well the faculties he has given us. Now, before joining the church, Augustine spent years training in and teaching rhetoric, using his mind and his words to sway people in any direction he desired, selling his services to politicians and religious elites. Words were tools and weapons for building up and tearing down. By understanding how they work, how people react to certain kinds of words, he began to understand how to craft them together in order to persuade people to think or act in a certain way. It didn't matter whether the goal was good or not. Much of the Confessions is an intense walk through the wrestling of Augustine's will, searching for happiness, pleasure, and meaning in things which ultimately did not satisfy him. Cults, women, pears. In hindsight, I probably could have listed those in the opposite order. At one point in the story, Augustine describes a close friend of his who died suddenly from an illness. In describing the agony, he says, "I had poured out my soul upon the dust, in loving one who must die as if he was never to die." The true agony that he felt outside of Christ is depicted in this loss, because he began to realize that while everything passes away, his desire and affection was placed on something as though he could possess it and possess it eternally. Ultimately, this is theft, trying to possess what is not ours to have. As David says in the Psalms, "The earth is the Lord's and all its fullness, the world and those who dwell therein." From Psalm 24. These things are the Lord's. Our friendships, our possessions, our studies at Augustine College, everything on this earth is vanity, or hebel, as we say in Hebrew. Vain things do not belong to us, and they are not forever. They are a gift from God. Later in Augustine's life, in writing on Christian doctrine, he describes the proper way a human should live in the world by differentiating between enjoyment and use. He says that we get entangled in the love of lower gratifications, slowing us down and turning us altogether away from the real and proper objects of enjoyment. David again sums this up in Psalm 37:4. "Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart." The Lord has created us. He has given us desire. But the truest fulfillment of those desires is not in the temporary things or the temporary life of this earth, as though they will truly satisfy. It is not in friendships, and it is not in Augustine College, as we see today that this, too, is coming to an end for us. This past week, a good friend of mine passed away in his sleep. Both he and his family are strong Christians, and that gives me hope and encouragement. But he was my age, so it feels very sudden and unexpected. I had not done a very good job of keeping in touch with him while I was away at school, and it's easy to look back on those kinds of life experiences and think of how often we regret not giving 100% to something until after that thing is gone and the work is not in front of us to do. but the Lord graciously humbles us through reminders of our own mortality. Death teaches us not to forget our humanity and our temporal nature, and to keep fixed on eternity. C.S. Lewis says, "To aim at heaven, and you will get earth thrown in. Aim at earth, and you will get neither." Things like death remind us that we cannot possess people on this earth. The moment we try to possess someone, that is the moment we fall out of proper relationship with them, replacing it with the experiential, the temporal, the limited. God allows those things to pass away in His timing so that we are drawn to things beyond. We are eternal souls in this temporary life. So, students, how can we look at the last 8 months with those things in mind? We've lived almost every day around each other for the last 8 months, and now there's a very good chance that after today, we may never all be in the same room again. That is a sobering thought when we look at our temporal lives, but it has made a significant impact on each of us in light of eternity, shaping our faith and our minds at the core of our understanding. And I pray for us that we look back on this as a part of our own history, knowing what we were before we started this journey and who we are as we leave today. And now we come to that promise I made at the beginning, giving credit where credit is certainly due. Thank you, parents. You've done a wonderful thing allowing your precious children to spend a year in a mysterious liberal arts program without knowing what might happen to us by the end of it. It's true, it might not get us employed, but it has given us so much more than simple career skills and job training, and I trust that you will see the impact it has had upon each one of us for the rest of our lives. You've helped us grow into who we were at the beginning of this semester. You were there when we had our mid-paper breakdowns. You talked us through the Christmas break when we questioned why we would ever put ourselves through another semester of this place, and we truly appreciate it. Under your guidance, we have progressed from children to adults. Thank you, professors. The organization and preparation that went into each lecture came across in ways that will shape us for a long time to come. Marking and providing feedback for us until the very last day possible gives us so much more than a quantitative letter grade. The classes and assignments you have put together deepen not only our understanding of the material, but also our appreciation for it. I have heard from almost the entire class that the work we have done in assignments and projects and papers has helped your efforts take root in us, giving us much greater things to take into the rest of our lives. Through your teaching, we have traveled through the history of art, literature, language, science, philosophy, music, and the church itself. We have progressed from history to the present. Thank you, Augustine community, guests, friends, alumni, resident advisors. Your involvement in the life of the college as friends, mentors, organizers, and much-needed cooks has not gone unnoticed. Augustine College has been unlike any other Christian community I have been a part of due to your involvement and the intentional community focus that is employed every single day here. You have helped us progress from isolated students slaving over our homework in a dark room into a Christian community of learning and growing that understands the importance of real relationship. And in understanding real relationships, thank you, students. Your contribution to this year cannot go unnoticed. We cover a variety of personalities and pursuits in many fields, possibly medicine, nursing, business, theater, technology, law, design, music, teaching, science, and who knows where we could all end up. The small size of our class has given me the blessing to get to know each of you for who you are, but the diversity has made each day a new and exciting experience, growing in faith and knowledge alongside each one of you. We've progressed from a group of 12 students to a family of believers under the banner of Christ that cares, hopes, dreams, and loves. Finally, we thank God, our Heavenly Father, recognizing that all of these people are His, and all of these blessed gifts we have come from Him. And I would like to close with a benediction from Romans 11. Oh, the depth of the riches both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are His judgments, and His ways past finding out. For who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has become His counselor? Or who has first given to Him, and it shall be repaid unto Him? For of Him, and through Him, and to Him are all things, to whom be glory forever. Amen.